Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andreas. I will be facilitating this webinar for EOSC Future. The presentation itself shall be covered by Dave Haynes and Monique Bellinghoff from Work Package 8. We shall be waiting a few more minutes in order to ensure that as many as possible catch the beginning of the presentation. The presentation itself should take about 30 minutes, give or take. Afterwards, we shall also have a Q&A session for you to ask the questions that come to mind during and after the presentation. For this purpose, I would advise you to register on Slido using either the QR code or accessing slido.com. That's slido.com with the code #682204 and passcode J4HNXE. That's J4HNXE, all in minuscules. We shall be waiting a few more minutes. Thank you for your patience.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Monique, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We are looking at quite an interesting topic, how commercial services can be distributed to the research community in Europe via the European Open Science Cloud. And I think we are doing some serious trend setting here. So please, listen to what we have to say, but do ask us questions after the presentations, because we do want you to help us unpack what this looks like. So I'm Dave Haynes. I'm on Work Package 8, as Andreas mentioned, on EOSC Future. And this is the first call we're running in terms of commercial services. I'm also the project director on OCRE, and the team working on this first call in EOSC Future are all working in parallel on OCRE, and I'll explain the relevance of that shortly. But essentially, what we're looking to do today is to introduce the OCRE framework holders, the commercial cloud market, to the research infrastructures, the e-infrastructures, the national research infrastructures, the National Research and Education Networks, the ERICs, and a whole host of entities that are currently providing digital services to the European research community. Some of these entities already use commercial cloud services to support their data centers, to underpin their own services, but we're looking to bring the community together and help us innovate around how these services can be distributed to the researchers in a way that is sustainable long-term through the European Open Science Cloud. So when we look at the OCRE framework contract holders, many of you are on the call, many of you know me, many of you have worked together with me on similar calls in OCRE. And the research infrastructures, we're going to be talking about the aggregators, and this is you guys. This is the entities that I've mentioned earlier. And we're looking at you to help us collaborate with the suppliers and innovate on mechanisms by which these services can be distributed to the researchers. We are using a similar mechanism to the last call used in our OCRE funding, adoption funding, because it was very successful. We got a very good response to it from the commercial suppliers and the researchers, the research institutes. And we could have well spent 2 to 3 times the adoption funding we had available to us. So the mechanism seems to be really good. We are looking at the distribution of commercial cloud services and why. So I talk to researchers on a daily basis. During my time on OCRE, I probably reviewed well over 120 proposals from research institutes looking to consume commercial cloud services. I've got a good idea of the needs of these researchers, as I think we all do. We are very immersed in this community, whether we're a supplier or on the research side of things. And we've seen so many requests for different services. The rate of innovation for these digital services in the commercial sector is unprecedented, driven by competition. But these services accelerate research in Europe at an incredible rate. and we're looking at our role in supporting the researchers and consuming these services. So while we've seen on almost all of the requests for services through OCRE, we've seen the need for commodity compute and storage type services. We've also seen the need for a whole lot of platform-based services that are available on the cloud marketplaces in support of machine learning. There's not much research taking place today that doesn't require that processes are enabled in terms of teaching themselves what the norms, the trends, and the outliers are. Also, there doesn't seem to be much research taking place where algorithms aren't being used to interrogate large data workloads, driving artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, and improved outcomes. So there are a lot of services that the researchers are looking to use that are only available through the commercial cloud providers. Now, the research institutes themselves are all able to easily procure these services through OCRE framework contracts in 40 countries across Europe. But the EOSC is looking to make these services available to the end user, often free at the point of use, but as easily consumable as possible. And this is where we need you guys to innovate. A couple of examples I have here is high performance compute. So in most of our proposals that we received on OCRE, an element of the ask was cloud computing, just consumable cloud computing as needed, not being used when needed. So very little, well, no latency, but also very little redundancy, because we don't have these big HPC centers that are sitting idle when people aren't consuming them. But also the researchers seem to be really interested in just simply consuming cloud compute as and when they need it, as opposed to lining up their workloads behind the big HPC centers for processing. So compute is one of the services, one of the key services. And I think an outcome of this call would be, a really interesting outcome would be demonstrating an EOSC compute as a service solution. So I think that would be a really interesting outcome. Also storage, another commodity service, but we work very closely, the EOSC works very closely with various fair data entities and are driving the concept of fair data. So fair is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But one of the biggest difficulties for a researcher in making their research data fair and accessible to other researchers in their disciplines is the standardization of metadata. So if we're not all calling the same data element by the same name, we lose a lot of agility and meaning in fair data. But I do know that a number of the commercial cloud providers have got data mining tools that would, for example, mine through a research data workload and generate standardized metadata so that this workload could be easily found by other researchers in the discipline where they have access. Because one of the reasons we're working within these big interoperability frameworks, we're working within the EOSC, is that we're making sure that data is secure and only people who should have access to these data workloads have access. But another very interesting outcome for me from this call would be an EOSC fair data platform that enabled the researchers not only to standardize their metadata, but also to potentially store huge research workloads in cold storage, for example, at fractional or almost zero cost. And I can see the suppliers smiling at me. But to be bought online within 24 to 36 hours after requesting it, it's a very sustainable way of hosting fair data. So those are a couple of the outcomes that I could think of as being really interesting outcomes of this first call. The entities, the non-profit European research education entities, we've had some pre-engagement with these entities. We do want these entities who are interested in participating to register as interested, so it's easier for the suppliers to get in contact with them. And this will all take place under the oversight of the EOSC Future Grant Committee. So task 1.5 on EOSC Future, there's a grant committee that is working very closely with us on our minimum criteria, minimum requirements, our awarding criteria, and will provide oversight in terms of the evaluation of the response. The minimum requirements we're looking at, the bidder must be able to provide a single purpose voucher, and that needs to be processed within the EU in terms of VAT. And the bidder will be the commercial supplier who is working and collaborating with one of these aggregators or research infrastructures. The bidder's T's and C's must be applicable or acceptable to the aggregator, because they will essentially contract. EOSC Future will buy the single purpose voucher on behalf of the aggregator, but the aggregator will be working closely with the supplier on the actual delivery of the resources. The supplier may not inflate the pricing, so the OCRE concessions must be applied in terms of any services that are delivered. And the aggregator must register the funded services on the EOSC marketplace. So this is really interesting. We've got an EOSC marketplace. There is, and if you have a look at the wiki in the link there, it's well described on how to register your services on the EOSC marketplace. Most of the aggregators that the suppliers would be working with already have services registered on the EOSC marketplace. So what we're looking for is the demonstration of mechanisms that will allow them to register these pre-procured commercial services on the marketplace. The awarding criteria that we're working around right now, we will award or score proposals based on their ability to demonstrate the service distribution mechanism within the EOSC rules of participation. We'll look at the plan and feasibility in terms of roles, responsibilities, and timelines, because we do want to see these services catalogued on the EOSC within the timeframe of the EOSC Future project. Sustainability. So it's fine to be able to register the pre-procured services that the EOSC Future Work Package 8 is funding. But what are your thoughts on how future funding could work? How these services could continue to be registered as available to researchers on the EOSC marketplace? You know, how would we look at future funding? What kind of mechanisms do you envisage could come into place there? And then also value for money. So between the bidder and the aggregator, the investment that they're putting into the output of these services. We're looking to publish at the end of September, facilitate Q&A till the end of October. The deadline for submitting proposals will be the end of November, when we will do the scoring and awarding in December. There will be a standstill period, and we will then be able to contract and start the projects. Now, I'll shortly be introducing you to Monique, who is our European procurement specialist, and she will be describing the structure of the call and the ins and outs. So getting in touch. So we want the suppliers to start talking to the aggregators or the research, the infrastructures. How do you do this? Well, the aggregators can go to the OCRE Cloud Catalog and identify the suppliers in their countries. There are contact details and reach out. Or you can register your interest in participating as an aggregator by using the link below in red. And this will help us inform the suppliers who are looking for partners who the interested parties are. So I'm not sure, I'll actually paste those into the chat once Monique begins. And I think at this point I hand over to Monique.
Thank you, Dave. And well, hello again for hopefully a lot of you. My name is Monique Penninckhoff. I'm the procurement specialist at Géant, and Géant is also going to be acting as a central purchasing body also through OCRE or through the OCRE framework for this EOSC Future goal. So what we did, we had some really great lessons learned and some gains best practices through OCRE, through the OCRE EC funded adoption mini competition. A lot of your the now current OCRE framework contract holders did actually anticipate it with. We had some great proposals, and we're hoping on even more and even better ones in this one, right? But based on the lessons learned and the best practices we had within OCRE, we're going to actually go further with this EOSC goal. So meaning we're going to work again with those single purchase vouchers, meaning that we are going to be fully compliant with all DVIT regulations, but also with the grant agreement, again, we have with the European Commission to make sure that everybody is going to be paying enough and the applicable VIT, but also that we're going to be able to get the funds back from the European Commission for eligibility. So that's all good. Again, we're going to now use this mechanism that we actually tried and succeeded the last mini competition within OCRE. So this is where we're going to ask you, the OCRE framework contract holders, the suppliers, to actually reach out and collaborate with, well, we're going to call them aggregators from now on. And also I've been calling them like this in the mini competition I'm drafting right now for this call. So these aggregators, again, like Dave just told you, you can just reach out and say, I would like to be an aggregator in this school, and I would like to collaborate with these suppliers. So, well, as you can see, what we did, we gained knowledge and experience through OCRE. Now we are scaling up, using it for the EOSC, and well, trying to get a broader and a wider outreach than we had actually in the mini competition with OCRE. There we were actually working with institutions and the projects, right? The research projects. And now we're going to go beyond that while using these aggregators, reaching out further than a single project or single projects. But more in scope of all the researchers beyond that, with a lot of projects, the long tail of science also. And like this, we're going to be different. We're going to be better. We're hopefully going to get even, better proposals from the market this time. But that's going to be hard because, well, again, we actually received a lot of good stuff last mini competition within OCRE, but we hope all of you actually have been learning and gaining best practices to get better all the time. Next, please, Dave. Okay, so this is actually what I drafted to kind of to try to explain you the whole thought about this aggregator, right? This function that we created, or we're trying to create, and trying to hopefully get, well, some good results of. So we start with the OCRE framework holders as a starting point, and then, as you know, we drafted up 475 contracts, and on these contracts can be used by, amongst others, non-profit European research and education infrastructures, partnerships, and collaborations. So again, this is a bit, it's wider than just a research and education institution, right? But there are within the participating entities that has been actually named and listed in the OCRE framework. These companies, we're going to again call them the aggregator from now on. They're going to have an outreach to their community behind them. So distributing what we would like to say, the commercial services we're going to procure on behalf of this research and education community, they're going to actually being the channel to this community. Including also reaching out eventually to the long tail science. So that researcher that's way beyond the limits that we had in OCRE is now hopefully going to be helped with the commercial services for us to be distributed. So this is what we are aiming to actually get by, and we're hoping that you can help us out with. So again, it's the OCRE framework holders that are going to be hopefully the heroes and helping us out with great proposals, reaching out in two phases, right? To the aggregators, but also aggregators reaching out to the suppliers, gaining knowledge and experience from both sides, and then reaching out to helping that research community behind and even wider than the aggregator. So hopefully having a much broader and wider outreach than all the other goals we had up to now. Next one. So again, we did it just actually a couple of weeks ago that we actually that the standstill period on this OCRE mini competition just ended. And now, well, we're just so excited. We're going to do a new one. And that's within this EOSC Future call. So the big differences here, I just tried to list it for you because all you framework, the framework holders all know what I'm talking about. But if you have any questions, please let me know. But I thought, because you're probably going to be really curious, I'm just going to already tell you what I think are the main differences between this OCRE mini competition and this EOSC mini competition that is going to be upcoming. So again, the cooperation with an aggregator. So dear framework holders, you're going to now reach out not only to a single institution working on a single research project, but you're going to go wider than that, working with this aggregator and focusing on the distribution mechanism. So in OCRE, we were focusing on the adoption of cloud services. And now, again, we're going to go beyond adoption of cloud services. We're going to go distributing cloud services and really focusing on that mechanism you're going to create with this aggregator within the research and education community. And this distribution is going to be in full, so fully and free of charge through the aggregator, meaning that the aggregator is not solely, but it is solely a channel, but that's it would be great to have a channel like that, right? All the way to the wider research and education community. So well, just talking a bit commercial because, well, a lot of you are, there's not going to be any margin, right? This aggregator is going to pass all these services through the research and education community without any charges, without anything. So they're going to be the channel, and nothing of the services and nothing of any fund is going to stick at this aggregator. The aggregator is going to do this because it's part of their function and tasks already within the research and education community. So in the little space on the right, you can see we have a call-off contract that is also going to be signed, and it's going to be the same OCRE call-off contract within OCRE with all the mini competitions. And it's going to be signed between the framework holder, the supplier, and the aggregator. The letter of support, and there was also MOU at first, right? And now the new mini competition within OCRE was a letter of support, will be written and signed from the aggregator. So the aggregator senior management is going to say, yes, we are aboard and we would like to actually help out on this occasion, fulfilling this role and this function of the aggregator, but also helping us, and that is the project, with providing information and experience, sharing knowledge, experiences, best practices, lessons learned based on this call in regards of the distribution of these commercial services. Based on some feedback from some of the OCRE framework holders, I'm going to try not to work with the price sheets, but going to try to ask you, OCRE framework holders, if you can provide me the budget and the quotation in the awarding criteria best value. Some of you already did. Well, some of you told me that this would be better in next school. So we're trying to do this. And I think it's also going to save you some puzzling with the Excel sheet and everything. So that's hopefully it's going to be a relief for you that it's hopefully going to be even less difficult, so more easy this time around. We're going to ask you to provide a plan of action, demonstrating again the focus on this distribution mechanism. Oh, and I made a typo. But again, it's not the adoption of the cloud services we're now looking at, but it's the distribution mechanism. And we're going to ask you to say, okay, how is it going to work? How are you going to collaborate with this aggregator? And what are going to be the steps? Also, of course, like all the mini competitions, please be aware there's going to be an exit plan, because well, we don't want to have any vendor lock-in, also not on this call. So please be aware. There's going to be an exit plan, and you have to also describe this exit plan. We're going to have some awarding criteria based on the sustainability. And again, it is stated the sustainability of the plan, the sustainability of this distribution mechanism that you're going to actually provide me. How is this going to last also beyond this call? How are we going to try to make commercial services last and also be distributed within the EOSC and within, of course, the research and education community. Also, like always, describing the benefits of these specific cloud services for the wider research and education community. So again, beyond a specific research project in this case, is going to be really important for you to describe, and you're going to be evaluated and scored and awarded, well, and ranked on based of this. So again, we're going to do a lot of things. We're going to do the same. We're going to rank, we're going to evaluate, we're going to score, and well, the proposals within those 2 million budgets that we have for this terrific call are going to be awarded after a standstill period. So a lot is going to be the same. So hopefully this is going to help you make up also good proposals sooner and better. But yeah, there is some quite difference because we're now working with aggregators and we're really focusing on the distribution mechanism. So it's a bit the same, but also a lot of difference. But we just hope you will be able to provide us some good proposals. And I think this is my slides. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Monique. So we're going to go into Q&A, which Andreas is going to facilitate for us. But just in ending the presentation, I do think that this provides a huge opportunity for both the suppliers who are looking at ways of getting their services consumed by the research community in Europe in the long term, and the EOSC is obviously going to have a very broad reach. And also, if we come up with really innovative distribution mechanisms, then your engagement with the research is a lot easier. And for the aggregators or the infrastructures, it enables us, I work for an aggregator, it enables us to actually provide the cutting edge services that the researchers are looking for, through our own platforms, through our own branding, underpinned by the commercial providers. And it helps us stay super relevant and support our community in the best possible way. So, we urge you all to think big, think quick, and be innovative. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Andreas for the Q&A.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for Monique for this very rich presentation. I will remind you that Slido is still available should you wish to file further questions. You may ask those questions anonymously and we shall address them in order. We have a little under half an hour to do so. First of all, then, a question, I suppose, for the both of you. How would you see the data sovereignty will be satisfied with usage of US-based hyperscalers? How will the European cloud market benefit from these proposals?
So I'll pick that one up. There are many European providers who are OCRE contract holders. There are a number of platforms. I won't mention them in the name of competition, but they are there, and we've received in the last OCRE call, we got a number of presentations from the European platforms. Obviously, the US-based hyperscalers are all represented by European resellers and who are compliant in terms of GDPR. In terms of data sovereignty, you can request to have your data hosted in specific data centers, obviously, and there are various measures that are being taken to ensure that we are compliant in terms of data sovereignty in Europe and GDPR. As always, whether it's in an on-premise data center, your own data center, or you do have a responsibility for checking the boxes in terms of data security, in terms of anonymizing your data. All of that kind of stuff still applies. So we are seeing across the research community in Europe, many researchers using all of the platforms for different workloads. And I think it's a workload by workload thing. So depending on the service that you're providing, if it's simple cloud compute, data sovereignty may not even be an issue. So it does depend on the service that is being consumed.
Monique, would you have anything further to comment, or may we move to the next question?
No, we can move to the next question, but just please be aware that the GDPR and all laws in this regards are applicable, and we are fully compliant with this, and all the OCRE framework contract holders are also needing to be. So yeah, all the laws are applicable to all the OCRE framework holders equally.
Thank you kindly. I will also remind our participants that you may not only ask questions, but also upvote your favorite questions so that we might get to them earlier should we run out of time. The next question is a bit broader in scope. Which type of user would you envisage as end user?
So the interesting thing here is, and something I forgot to mention, is the EOSC core. The people who are delivering the EOSC core, the teams in EOSC Future, have the concept of horizontal services, which are services that are applicable to researchers across all disciplines. And a good example of this is storage or compute, where all disciplines use these services. So the European researcher who would be consuming services that currently consume services from the research infrastructures, the e-infrastructures, the independent researcher, or the researcher who's just simply consuming services, often pre-funded by the European Commission. So simply the question, the answer is the European researcher. But you could, in your proposals, target a specific discipline, a specific group of researchers with a very specific service, because if you are able to, in registering resources on the EOSC catalog, you are able to target your audience. In other words, the science discipline that would be consuming the service, or there's a whole lot of metadata around the service when you catalog it. So it could be a focused discipline-oriented researcher. It could be researchers across all disciplines, but it is the European researcher.
All right, thank you. Unless there are further comments from Monique, perhaps then, as a next question, some practical examples of who ideal aggregators could be.
So I don't want to give real practical examples, because this is a competition. And I think, many of the participants in the EOSC Future project, many of the consortium members in the EOSC Future project are probably good examples of these aggregators. If the question is coming from a supplier, you just have to look at the national research and education networks. look at ourselves, look at the list of ERIC's research infrastructures. You're probably all working with companies that are European e-Infras. As I said, if there are e-Infras interested, or any of these entities interested in participating, they are going to be registering, and we are going to make that list available to the suppliers. So the aggregators, it'll be very clear who the aggregators would be.
All right then. Another question seems to be highly requested to explain and differentiate the important roles of contract holder, aggregator, and the wider R&E community, perhaps, if that is possible in a few words.
Okay, so the framework, the contract holder is, as Monique described, resellers of cloud services who were awarded OCRE framework contracts during a competition, a tender process in 2020. And their role would be to supply the services. The aggregator, their role would be they already supply services, often out of their own data centers, often to services that they've developed. But how can they actually use the services and microservices and actual platform and software services from the contract holders to enhance their services, to provide new bespoke services to the community through the EOSC? And the wider R&E community are the users of the European Open Science Cloud. And in making new and innovative services available through the EOSC, we're hoping to draw a lot more of the participants in this community to the EOSC as a first port of call for these digital services.
All right, thank you very much. Now, apparently, I think quite a few who are newbies, I'm quoting here, in the EOSC environment, would be grateful if you could exemplify some simple journeys for submitting applications. So for those entering the environment, what would be your do's and don'ts and recommendations?
So the application is going to be a proposal that has been presented by the aggregator and the supplier in collaboration. So if we're talking about aggregators or people who are not-for-profit infrastructure service providers, wanting to register services on the EOSC for the first time, I will distribute the links to the various wikis so they can get a good understanding of what it means to work within the EOSC rules of participation and how you would go about registering a service. So I'm not sure if it was that kind of a newbie. For the market, the contract holders, the suppliers who haven't worked closely with the EOSC before, their relationship with an aggregator would be very similar to their relationship with any research institute, where they would be under contract to deliver services. And really, it's how those services are delivered. Are they delivered through some kind of white label? What is the mechanism? This is where we're looking for the collaborations to innovate.
All right. We're returning to the topic of hyperscalers with the question of getting data out of the cloud. So we know that, according to this question, they will store big amounts of European scientific data. However, getting data out of the cloud can be very costly. Is there a plan for data portability?
So Monique drew the market's attention to how we will be scoring on exit plans. And the exit plan actually speaks to getting the data out of the cloud. We already, through OCRE framework contracts, we already have data ingress and egress waivers. So the actual costly part of transitioning a workload is often network. And we have kind of checked the box on that in terms of the contract. But we do ask the suppliers for exit plans. How would the aggregator, if they wanted to transfer their service to another supplier or wanted to bring it on premise or whatever they wanted to do with it once the money runs out, could they do that easily enough? And that is something that they are going to be scored on.
All right, then, thank you very much. I will remind all our participants that this presentation is being recorded and that the contents of the presentation shall be also made available afterwards. I'm going to have a look at the questions that haven't been answered yet, or that don't cross over with ones that have already been asked. Let's see. Yes, how would you see that data sovereignty will be satisfied with usage of US-based hyperscalers? How the European cloud market would benefit from this proposal? I think we've already answered this question. This question, would it be better for the aggregator to be an infrastructure focused or a research center representing a community?
So either. As I said, we are going to be looking at proposals that best demonstrate the mechanism by which commercial services can be distributed through the European Open Science Cloud. So as I said, if your service is actually really focused and bespoke, looking at a specific science discipline or a specific type of researcher, that's absolutely okay, as long as it demonstrates the mechanism. If it is what we've referred to as a horizontal service, so a compute storage type service that would be used by all researchers across all disciplines, that's also okay. Just quickly, I'm just going to ask Monique to chip in here, because in terms of asking questions, once the call or the procurement's in motion and the suppliers have been invited to participate, there is a period of Q&A on the procurement platform. Monique, can you talk a little bit about how we respond to queries?
Yes, of course. So we're going to use, the procurement platform that Shell uses is now called Marcel. It was called Negomatrix. It was a takeover. So Negomatrix is still working, but they will refer you to Marcel. And well, it's all the same, but it's just a different name. And what is possible, what we're going to do, and depending on how much questions we're going to receive, I'm going to try to keep the questions, the Q&A open as long as possible, at least until a week before the deadline of the proposals, right? But if there are a lot questions in a really short time amount, I need to kind of, we need to close it, because we need to provide you all the answers before you provide, you can start writing your proposal. And you is the OCRE framework contract holder I'm talking about. So it will, so yes, we have a Q&A, and I will try to keep it open as long as possible, because I think it's really good to continue to have a dialogue and a questionnaire, open questionnaire with our suppliers. But depending on how much questions we get at once, we need to close it maybe a bit earlier than we did with the OCRE mini competition. We actually kept it open as long as possible until a week before the submission, the deadline of the submission. Hopefully, again, this is going to be the same thing, because I think everybody really liked it, that we had an open line continuously, you providing me questions and, well, us providing answers, sometimes within a couple of minutes and sometimes a couple of days. But yeah, we're going to use this platform to have this conversation with the suppliers, like we do all the time.
We can also supply the two of you with the questions that have been asked, as well as further questions that might come in. And if you have the opportunity, you may then answer them more thoroughly at your leisure. One question that I did notice here was, my apologies. Yes, they do move around a little bit, which makes it not always as easy to There was a question of about the vendor lock, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, someone mentioned measures to avoid vendor lock-in. Can you please elaborate what they are?
So vendor lock-in is an interesting concept. If you, and all of our organizations, for example, use a productivity suite, we essentially locked into that productivity suite while the organization uses that specific productivity suite. The only place I can actually see vendor locking being an issue is with commodity services. So if there's a compute or storage service that all suppliers can provide, and it isn't being specifically selected, and it could easily transition from one platform to another, what prevents the vendor lock-in is the exit plan provided by the supplier to say, well, when the contract's up and the money's been spent, the aggregator could easily shift that service onto another platform, because there's nothing about that service that is tied into the services or microservices, the specific services or microservices that are supplied by that platform. So it really is handled by the exit plan. This is now remember, these are pre-procured services. So if we pre-procure 300,000 euros worth of compute from vendor A working with aggregator B, that voucher's been bought, it's being consumed. It's only really once the voucher is exhausted and that 300,000 euros worth of services have been consumed by the research community that you're going to want to shift platforms anyway, if you are for some reason dissatisfied with your current platform. But vendor lock-in, it is a fairly conceptual thing.
All right. Only a few more questions, I'm afraid, due to time running out. There was one comment to data portability, speaking that of the fact that cloud exit strategy is only one aspect. The other aspect is to move data regularly between data centers. How would you handle this?
So again, it would depend on the proposed service as to what data resources needed shifting. But if you're shifting from, if you look at a supplier and they've got data centers in Ireland and Germany and France, wherever their data centers are, to shift between those data centers, you can actually do quite easily. It depends entirely on what service you're providing and how that's consuming data. And so that would kind of be an agreement between the aggregator and the supplier in innovating the service, I think, as to how easily that could be done.
I think we have time for at least two more questions. The first question will be to further detail how you will secure European data sovereignty and protection of GDPR related data. This is from René Buch from EOSC.
Yeah. So again, data sovereignty, it's really up to, so this would really, in this call, this would really be up to the aggregator. You'd need to have a look at the service you're providing. You would need to have a look at the data sovereignty requirements for any data being stored in support of that service. And you would potentially have to choose your supplier based on that, if there were any issues with data sovereignty. But again, it really is workload based. So whatever the service the aggregator is intending, collaborating with the supplier on, they need to make sure that the service doesn't infringe any data sovereignty requirements that may be in place. And you know, as Monique said, you know, in terms of GDPR, all of the resellers are compliant. The sharing of personal data, European personal data, doesn't happen. If it did, it would be under severe penalties. You know, it's the same as any contract you sign in Europe.
All right. Perhaps then one last question. The project already presented and not awarded in the previous mini competition be represented with improvements?
Absolutely. And in the OCRE mini competitions, there were occasions where submissions were disqualified because they weren't actually meeting the requirements in terms of the definition of the core, the relationship between the supplier and the research institute, where we saw that one of these aggregated type organizations had come up with a very innovative solution that they were wanting to share with their broader research community, but it didn't completely check the boxes in terms of the minimum requirements. That's the kind of example where one of these aggregators, has collaborated on previous calls. They didn't make it through the door because their proposal didn't quite meet the requirement of the core. And those proposals could definitely be tweaked and resubmitted here.
All right, it is now 5 to 3. I would like to leave it up to our two presenters to see if they would wish to answer more questions, or if you would rather take the time and read through them at your leisure.
So it would be good to read through them at our leisure, and we can certainly kind of reach out. We can certainly, provide some kind of information on some kind of forum. The one that I did see that came in quite close to the end was what would happen to any data stored at the, when the money ran out. And as we said, in the awarding criteria, we're going to look at the sustainability, the way in which the mechanism would sustain these services beyond the proof of concept funding that Work Package 8 is providing. And Jan Meyer from SECTI works very closely with this team. And I know he's on the funding sustainability working group in the European Open Science Cloud. And this is the kind of question that we want the aggregator and the supplier to answer. So when the pre-procured services run out, first of all, are they able to be procured by the researchers and continue to run in a way that where the researcher is procuring the service? But also, are they able to be pre-procured if new funding is made available, not necessarily through the EOSC, for example, but if you have a look at a lot of the aggregators, they are funded, they do build data centers, or if they're not building data centers, they are underpinning some of their services using infrastructure as a service. Where's that funding coming from? So what we'd like to hear in these proposals is the aggregator and the supplier their thoughts on how the service could be sustained beyond the adoption funding.
All right, then. Once again, I would like to thank the two of you, Dave and Monique, very much for taking the time to present this call and for taking the time to answer the questions. We shall make this presentation available as soon as possible. Thank you all who've come here to participate and to listen for this hour. Should you have any further questions, we shall do our best to address them as best we can. And I hope that you have a very nice day and a very productive beginning to your week.
Thanks, everyone.